You have no idea what it took to get here and how happy and blessed I am to be here. If I could scream like Naomi, I would do that. But somehow I don't think it would be appropriate. But thank you. It's so good to see. I posted today on Twitter. It's so good to see all the beautiful faces. So a couple of things. I'm going to first recognize my family. Without them, I would not be here. My husband, my son, my daughter. But it's a little awkward because those of you who have heard me speak know that I use them for content. So it's going to be interesting to tell stories about them while they are here. And secondly, I have my handy-dandy timer. And this is important for me because I can talk. So you're going to hear it go off about 15 minutes before I'm to end, and then it'll go off the last time saying, girl, get off the stage. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started. We're talking about creating an anti-bias, anti-racist early childhood space. But first, I want to acknowledge the land that I stand on. I want to acknowledge that I'm standing on the traditional and tribal lands of the Seminole and Tocobado people. I also want to acknowledge those who were stolen from the African continent and whose forced labor helped to build this country. And it's not enough just to acknowledge. And I know a lot of you are hearing that, oh, we're doing that acknowledgement, oh, we're doing this. It's not enough just to acknowledge the land. We have to be committed to doing the work that allows such oppression to persist. So that's really what acknowledging it is. First, acknowledging Indigenous people, the land that we stand on, acknowledging that they still exist. And all the efforts of annihilation, they are still here. And we also have to acknowledge what it took to build this country. And it was on the back of Africans who were stolen from the African continent. So, let's jump in. We're going to talk about equity today, equity work, because that's what it takes in order to really create an anti-bias, anti-racist system. So, here's another pyramid. So at the bottom of this pyramid is the individual work. And this is the work that you engage in as you're beginning this journey. And it's really reflecting on and changing and challenging your own biases. And then next we have the interpersonal work. And this is what you do as you're engaging with others and bias and racism shows up. Then we have the community work, where we are really accountable to the communities that we serve that are suffering from inequities. And then the institutional level. And this is where our commitment to equity is consistent with who we say we are. Do we do what we say we're going to do? Are we as committed, or did we just create an equity statement because it sounds good? And then we have the systemic work. And this is eliminating policies and practices that harm the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color group. But today we're going to really focus on the individual level, and then we will get to the interpersonal level. So, a lot of times when I talk about this work, people challenge me, and I don't mind being challenged because it helps me grow. But they challenge me and they say, you know, Rosemarie, it's not only about race. And they are, right. It is not only about race, but it is always about race. Always, always, always. Because no matter how you slice and dice the data, Black and brown children are at the bottom, and Black children are at the very bottom. We cannot solve this without talking about race and without acknowledging that it's all about race. So, if we're talking about creating an anti-bias, anti-racist early childhood system, we have to acknowledge that racism exists at every level of our early childhood system. And you know what? That is hard to take. Did anyone have a visceral reaction to that? Not the field we love, not the field that we dedicated our lives to. I mean, it's hard for us. And I'll tell you, this is the greatest feeling because I'm with my people right now. I train everywhere, all over, but you are my people. This is where I live. This is where I'm most comfortable. And this doesn't feel good. But because it doesn't feel good, doesn't mean that we should ignore it. So let's talk a little bit. This is where we're most comfortable, implicit bias. And we've been talking about implicit bias for a long time, right? How many of you have heard of implicit bias and gone to implicit bias trainings? Almost everyone in the room. So I'm going to give you a quick review. So even though we believe with our whole hearts that we see and treat people as equals, the reality is that we do not. The data tells us that we don't. And we have to be aware of the role that implicit or unconscious bias plays in our decision making, our perceptions, and our interactions with other people. So, implicit bias, what is it? Implicit bias is an unconscious process that results in how we perceive people based on how we see them as different from us. It can be race, it can be gender, it can be sexual orientation, it can be height. Do you know one of the biggest, not biggest, but one big category of implicit bias for Americans is teeth? Do you know if we really have a bias against people with crooked teeth? So, do you know that? It's really amazing that you wonder, you see a child with crooked teeth and you wonder, why do I have some nonsense? I mean, or you see them as little kids, it's really amazing. So it can be any category of difference. I like to use this ladder of influence just to show you how quickly we engage in implicit bias. And when you look at this ladder, we find that as we do any other ladder, from the bottom up, you select data from what you observe. And once you select the data, you add meanings. And the meaning that you add is cultural and personal. So this is where you start to make things up. And then you make assumptions. You added your own meaning, and then you made assumptions, and then you draw conclusions. Then you adopt beliefs, and then you take action based on those beliefs. And we don't even know we're doing it, but we do it all the time. Now, I'm going to show you how fast we do it. Sir, what's your name? Bruce. Bruce, may I use you as an example? Okay, I could go to spot and be complicated. But here's Bruce. I'm taking a look at Bruce. Those of you who can't see him, Bruce has a mohawk, and he's got some big guns. And I see Bruce. And the minute I see him, I size him up. See, this takes milliseconds. You don't know you do this when you meet people, but you size them up immediately. So here's Bruce, mohawk, he's got some guns, and these are some of the assumptions I made just looking at Bruce. He's a bodybuilder. He eats clean. He doesn't care what people think about him whatsoever. He creates his own path. You get on board or you don't. He might drive a motorcycle, maybe a little bit. I'm going to say sports car because right away he wants. He's got a couple of kids. Was any of that true? Yeah. Now, when you size people up, it can be a gift or it can be a curse. I'm not clairvoyant, I don't know how that happened. But the assumptions I made about Bruce, they were a gift, they were all positive. It reinforced him. He's looking over here like, wow. But sometimes it's a curse and it can be negative. Because I can say, what is he doing in here? This man with all these muscles? I mean, it's steroids. I mean, I could have gone the other way. So I want you to be aware of the assumptions you make about people when you meet them. Let me show you an example of going up the ladder. Rosemarie walks right in here, she didn't even speak. She enters a room, she doesn't speak. Do you know that speaking is cultural? Yes. It's cultural. Some of you were intentionally taught when you enter a room, you speak. On the other hand, some of you were taught when you enter a room, you don't make yourself the most important person, you wait for a quiet opening, and then you speak when it's convenient. So, let's walk the ladder here. I select data. Just right past me without English speaking. Now, the way that I was raised, you speak when you enter a room. But not only do you speak, but you hug. If I were to walk into my grandmother's house and she was sitting in there with my aunties and uncles, my job is to walk in and say, hi, Auntie Ola, hug, hug. Hi, Aunt Rosalie, hug, hug. Hi, Uncle Ernest, hug, hug. That is what I must do. If I want to get in trouble, I can walk in and go, hey. If I want to get in big trouble, I can walk in and say nothing. But that's the expectation. So, Rosemarie goes right past me without me speaking. So now, I'm going to add my own personal and cultural meaning to that. Did you see her? She just sashayed herself over here with those orange shoes and leaving this kid. What is her problem? And then I'm going to make assumptions. She thinks she's better than us. She thinks she's better than us. She doesn't like us. And then I am going to really after I make these assumptions, I am going to draw conclusions and take action based on my beliefs and start looking for another job because I'm never going to be appreciated here. She thinks she's better. And that's how fast we go up the ladder. But imagine the cultural disconnects. I actually worked with a very good friend who was my son's kindergarten teacher, and now we're colleagues at university, Dorothy. I always thought it was odd that Dr. Chaplin would walk down the long hallway to our offices, go into her office, and open the door. And not only did she not speak when she came in, but even when she left, she never said goodbye, because the same way you're expected to speak when you walk in my family, is the same expectation when you leave. You say bye, no matter where people are in the house. If my husband is not right where I receive him, and I'm heading out, I have to find him. I mean, I'm leaving out is just the way, not good or bad, right or wrong, but the way that I was brought up. So after Dorothy attended one of my workshops and she saw this, she goes, Rosemarie, I couldn't for the life of me understand why you walk down the hallway. Hi! Good morning! How are you? How's everybody? And then I said, I never understood how people walk in the house. And she said that if you notice I leave my door open, that's the invitation to come in. So imagine the cultural disconnects, and as we talk about the pyramid model, and I'll be referring to that first level about building relationships, imagine how fast you go up this ladder with a parent who interrupts your circle time. Hi, Michelle! Hi! I'm busy. If you were that person who talked to wait. But what if the parent walked in and didn't speak to you when you're the person who speaks? So be aware of just some cultural disconnects that may occur. Let's go to the ladder again. I selected, let's just say it's an African-American boy being in the world in preschool. This child is pretty big, and he looks like he's rough. And then I'm going to add my own meaning and my own cultural understandings to this. I spoke to him. He didn't speak. Because another cultural expectation is children speaking. Now we expect children to speak to us when we speak to them. And of course we expect adults to do it too, but how many of you have seen people make children speak? Confession, I used to. I remember I was that director of a child care facility, and I stood at the door and greeted every single child. And I expected everyone to speak. I'll never forget Samantha. Good morning, Samantha. Samantha, I said good morning. Samantha, good morning. And her mother says, I don't think she feels like speaking this morning. And my thought was, she has a choice. But I've grown up since then. But that was my feeling. So anyway, this little boy didn't speak. So I think he has an attitude. So I better watch him because he's already big. He's a big boy. So I made assumptions. Gosh, he's not friendly, he's big, I couldn't get him to smile, I tried to speak to him. God, he's probably going to be aggressive with the other children. And then I draw conclusions based on my belief. I know we're going to end up putting him at the top of the pyramid with a plan. And we decide this at enrollment. You know, the problem with this example is everything's based on research. It's true. That we, adultification, how many of you have heard of it? that little black boys are about to be older than they are by 4.5 years, even when teachers have knowledge of child development. And the bigger they are, the more aggressively big they are. And little black boys are the most suspended children in America. So we need to be aware of that. So, we all know the lie. We have all been there. Because we're all biased. We didn't ask for it. We don't want it. It's like an inheritance you rather get back. We're biased because we breathe biased air and we drink biased water. No one is immune. I'm going to share with you my example, an example of me going up the ladder. And it happened a few years ago. And it happened when my son was at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And it was between his sophomore and junior year that he decided he wanted to move off campus. Now, we really engage in personalities when we have to make snap decisions, when there's fear of ignorance, we don't have enough information. So here, he wants to move off campus. He grew up in Colorado, in a suburb. Never feared for his life, ever. Well, kind of, with racism, that's another story. But never really feared for his personal safety. And here he is in Washington, D.C., this big city. So when he said he wanted to move off campus, it was scary for his dad. But we never want our fears to impede his growth. So we said, okay. And once we said, okay, I went to Mama Bear Road. I went to go find him a place close to campus that he could walk to. We didn't want him to have his car. But you know, during that time, around the area of Howard, anybody here from Washington, D.C.? Around that area was pretty dangerous and hadn't gentrified yet. That's another lecture. But so we were kind of afraid. So finally, I found a house, a pink house. It was close enough to campus for him to walk to. He was shared with 4 grad students, and he was kind of an old soul, and he was happy. So I said, Clarence, go meet them and see how you like them. He went, he met them, he loved them, they loved him, we're ready to go. He's ready to sign the lease, but I was not ready yet. I needed to go see it. Anybody else like that? So I flew to DC. I was doing some work there anyway, but I flew to DC and I wanted to meet with people, I wanted to get a feel, I wanted to walk around. Side story. I have sensory integration processing disorder. Familiar with it? So I'll tell you how it shows up for me as an adult. It's in the way that I get lost. When I get lost, I get very lost. I mean, disoriented lost, perspiring lost. Can't tell east, west, north, south, everything those letters, those numbers, those words when you give it direction. But thank goodness for GPSs. So this story will make sense in a minute. So I rent a car, I put the address on my GPS, and I'm driving around DC. You know, sometimes the GPS gets confused in DC. But here we are driving DC, and I'm feeling really good, and I pull up to the street and I'm gonna make a left turn. I'm feeling really good about this because I see the pink house. So I knew I didn't get lost. So I made the left turn, and there was the pink house. I'm about to pull in to park. And as I pull in, I notice standing on the porch right next to the pink house is a black man. A rather dark, pretty large black man. I looked at him, and I went straight up the ladder. I looked at him, and my first thought, remember how long it takes? Milliseconds? My first thought was, this is too dangerous, he can't live here. My second thought is, I hope the housing office is open because I need to go get his door room back. And my third was, what just happened? What just happened? I caught myself, and when I did, I cannot tell you the sense of shame that washed over me. Even right now, my heart races as I tell this story. I was so ashamed. The shame was so powerful that I put my hands on the steering wheel, put my head down, and I sobbed. I cried. I could not believe that I looked at a black man for a second and thought the area was too dangerous for my black son. And not only did I feel shame, but then I felt unworthy. It's like, how can I face you and talk about this? And I just did that. And I am sitting there crying, I mean, not not cute, cry, but ugly, snot-nosed, and I was just crying, and then all of a sudden I realized that I'd been sitting there a while. And I looked up, and the guy was like, what's going on here? So when our eyes met, he ran down the stairs. And I thought, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. You know what I wanted to do? I just wanted to drive off. I thought about it. This is a rental car, he's never met me. I said I can go. But I did what I'm going to encourage all of you to do when it happens to you. Not if, but when. And I stayed. And I got myself together, and he goes, Mary, are you okay? Are you okay? And I said, yeah, just give me a moment. I got myself together, and I got out, and I'm thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? Because I had to come up with an excuse. He goes, are you all right? I said, yes. He goes, well, what's the matter? Are you crying? I said, well, I think I'm lost. And when I get lost, I get really lost, because I have sensory integration processing disorder, so I get so irritated when I'm going through all this. And he says, calm down. I know what sensory integration processing disorder is. There's another bias. You do. He goes, yeah, he said, I'm a native. Give me the address and I can get you anywhere you want to go in D.C. And I gave it to him. He goes, man, it's right here. Thank you so much. And then we talked. And by this time I'm okay. And I said, you know, my son's a student at Howard, and he's going to be living here. And you're a student at Howard too. And he goes, kind of. And I said, well, what do you mean kind of? He said, well, actually, I'm affiliated with Howard University Medical School. I'm a resident. Wow. I would have listened to that. But you know what? He did not have to be a future doctor to earn my respect and not be feared. He could have been a janitor, he could have been a faculty member, he could have been a Walmart worker, he could have been homeless. But what he should not have been was deemed dangerous, simply because he was a black man standing on his porch. And I did that. I did it. And it was the most shocking thing ever, I believe, in terms of this work that I've ever done. You know why? Because I love black men. Love them. My husband. My brother, all my uncles who nurtured me. I love them. I love them. And I have not had a negative experience with a black man, so how did this happen to me? It happens because we're biased. We all are. We all are. I didn't think that was one of my biases. That was the shock. But we are. So, what do I want you to do with this? As you build your relationships with your children and families, notice when you go up the ladder. Notice. This could have looked very different if I had been engaged in this work. I could have pulled over, made my left turn, pulled over to the park and go, something about this place just doesn't feel right. I think I'll go get this doorman back and try again later. That's what we do, we dismiss it. So what do I want you to do? I want you to stop. I want you to notice. I feel uncomfortable. And I want you to wonder why. Why am I uncomfortable? I don't know if I went through those steps, but I know that I was determined not to leave so that I could face it. The other thing I want you to do is, if you like, use this language for framing. How many of you are here with your team members? Quite a few of you. So when you see someone engaging in bias, say, oh, Michelle, girl, I think you just want to pull her. And so go, did I? Or your response, if someone tells you you want to ladder, your response should be, tell me more. And that way you can disrupt this bias in that moment. So, what I want to do. Oh, that wasn't me. Okay, let me hurry up here. So, what we know, and I said earlier, that racism is at every level of the early childhood system. Where? We know what the disparity They persist, especially when it comes to discipline and interactions. We know that children are suspended very young and very often. We know that preschool children are suspended 3 times more than kindergarten through 12th graders, and we know that every day, about 250 preschoolers, we're not talking about family child care, Head Start, although we don't suspend, but we can talk about that another time. And also, private preschools, child care facilities, those data are not included in this. This is just preschool data. But who's been suspended? We know that boys are suspended, and boys are suspended a lot. Dr. Walter Gilliam uses his 3 Ds. If you are a big black boy, you're much more likely to be suspended. I added a D to that. If you're a big black boy with disabilities, you're really more likely to be suspended. And we know that African American preschoolers are almost 4 times more likely to be suspended than their white friends. We also know that African American girls are only 20% of the preschool female population, with 54% of those who are suspended. Those of you who are seeing my TED Talk, you know why that's so close to my heart. Because I was that child. You see me with this orange on? It's the top of the pyramid. That's what I would have been if I were in preschool right now, at that time. So, can anyone guess the top 2 reasons that little black girls are suspended so much? Say that again? Bossy. So we're going to say sassiness. Bossy, all of that sassiness. Wait. How in the world did you know that? George just said it. Hair. What is the number one? I'm taking some speaker privilege being black. Tell me, what's the number 1 rule about black hair? Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't act like you want to touch it. Don't even ask to touch it. Don't sneak behind me and touch it. Don't touch it. Now this is, and I'm generalizing, but most black people, and if you're black and you agree with me, just say amen. Most of us were taught when we left the house, this is the speech you got. Honey, be good. Do your best. You do whatever the teacher tells you to do, and don't let nobody play. Don't let nobody touch your hair. Anybody? Don't let nobody touch your hair. Don't let nobody play your hair. You better come back here with the same number of beads and the rest of the I don't know where it comes from, but there is a video that's amazing about the history of black hair, where enslaved women with the cornrows were maps to escape, and food was braided into those cornrows for sustenance. That's how we actually got a lot of food from the continent here. But anyway, that's probably don't touch my hair. But I'm going to show you a suspension waiting to happen. Here we go. Oh, I haven't started yet. And now the hand comes and she slaps it away. Who gets in trouble? Taylor. And Taylor will be in trouble all day, because children playing in her hair when her mom already told her, girl, you don't want to come back to those beads exactly what color. So when we talk about racism, we also have to look at the workforce. That nationally, African American early educators earn less than their peers across all settings. They're much more likely to earn $15 an hour, and Hispanic early childhood educators are more likely than white teachers to work at the bottom of our field as aides or parents. We also understand that there is racism in early childhood special education. And see, these are the areas that we're not as comfortable talking about, but we have to talk about. We know that Latinx children are much more likely, the least likely to be served under Part B, Section children are less likely to receive early childhood intervention services. Indigenous children are also underrepresented in early intervention. White children are more likely to be referred for early intervention for developmental delays even before they're screened. But Black children with autism are diagnosed 3 years after their parents express concern. So many of them age out of parts B and C before they ever get a diagnosis and before they ever get services. We also know that white children are identified with ASD more often than Black and Hispanic children, and overall, Black and Hispanic children with ASD receive evaluations much later than white children. There's also racism in terms of access. What we know is that the inequality of opportunity for high-quality early childhood education is very concerning for BIPOC children. Only 1% of Latino children and only 4% of Black children are enrolled in programs that are high quality. Black and Latino children are underrepresented also in state preschool programs. And we know that early childhood programs attended by low-income children and children of color provide quality so low that it doesn't even promote their learning and development. And when it comes to infants who do not speak English, they're less likely to be in quality settings that expose them to the English language. So we can go on and on and on, but I want you to see that being aware of our biases isn't enough. We have to address the racism across all of our systems in the early childhood program. And we have to be able to talk about this. That's why I'm so glad you're all here today. We have to be able to talk about race, racism, and bias. And sometimes we're tired. I know people of color, that battle fatigue is real. And then white people were tired of it too. I had an older white woman that said, you know what, Rosemarie, I'm so tired of talking about this. And I'm tired of talking about slavery and all of that. He said, do you know what, Rosemarie? I have never ever in my whole life owned a slave. And I said, that is awesome. I said, that is great. Because you know what? I have never ever in my whole life been a slave. You've never owned one, and I've never been it. But here we are, with the residual impacts of that, one of the original systems of oppression in this country. We're reporting the impacts right now in our hands. Well, we've never owned slavery, never been a slave. What are we going to do about it? Because people are still impacted by it today. So we have to be able to talk about race, racism, and bias. And you have to increase your comfort level. Now, there are some of you in this room who grew up with families where you never talked about race, or talked about race very seldom. And then there are some of you in this room who talked about race almost every day. People of color have a tendency to talk about race much more often than white people, for a couple of reasons. One is that there's survival environment. We have to prepare our children to live in a racialized society. And we have to talk about race to counter the negative impact of stereotypes that they'll be judged by. For those of you with white skin, your skin serves as a protective barrier where you don't have to talk about it. But guess what? That's over. Because you have children that you have to talk to race about. We have to talk to children about race. We have to talk about race. Because when we don't talk to children about race, they'll create their own reality based on limited information. And do we really want 3 and 4-year-olds to create their own opinion on race without our guidance? Because I can take you through the whole stages of racial development. And what we know is that by the time a child is 3, of course they notice race, they notice skin color, but now they're starting to add value. So those children who are suspended, because they're picking up cues from adults, those children who are getting suspended, they know that that child isn't as valuable. They act up. They disappear for a few days. And they're learning who's disposable and who's not. They're picking up cues from adults. Even something so simple as going to the supermarket and who you ask for help. If you are white and you go to a supermarket and you need help, you might pass by all the black workers and then find the right person to ask help. Do you know you just taught that child that this white person has more knowledge and information than all the others you passed up? Things we don't even know we do. And I say we because collectively, We do it all the time. So we have to be willing to talk to children about race. We also have to be aware of how bias and racism shows up every single day in our early childhood programs. What does it look like? Here's one. Mispronouncing, making fun of, or shortening children's names that are not traditional or traditionally white names. Anybody in here have a name that's hard to pronounce? I see some hands up. So you know what I'm talking about. So not only do we mispronounce it, but sometimes we will change children's names. I had a student, college student, Sasha. My colleague told her, oh, that's just too hard for me to call you Sasha. How disrespectful. We're trying to build a spirit when we develop positive and supportive relationships. What we're doing, that we don't put this label on, but what we're doing is that we are creating community. We are creating a sense of belonging. We are creating a positive climate. And how do we create a sense of belonging when you have changed a child's name? When you continue to mispronounce people's names, when you shorten a person's name. My name is Rosemarie. You just don't get to call me Rose. I'm sorry. When I hear Rose, that's just someone who loves me. That's from my family. That's from way back. My parents, my son Clarence at 18, he went through a rite of passage through one of our organizations and he received his African name as Kamara. We know who he grew up with versus who he met based on what they call him. If they call him Clarence or they call him Kamara, it makes a difference. Jasmine is named after my grandmother. Her middle name is Jessie B. And she was Jessie B until she turned 11. And then she came home and said, people call me Jasmine from now on. But that was where she got her power from. And she had the right to do that. I don't know why. Did someone say, why are you called Jessie B? And what does the B stand for? My grandmother's from Louisiana. Her initials were middle names. I don't know why. But she was Jessie B. So we don't have a right to shorten a child's name, change their name, make fun of their names. And you have, especially young African American moms, they name their children whatever they want to. They don't care anything. They will put together a name and you wonder where that came from. Excuse me. We don't have a right to change it. You can say, tell me more about it. I had a child when I was named Juanita. It was so unique. I said, oh, I haven't heard that name before. Tell me about it. And I asked the dad, and the dad said, you know, this is our 6th child, and our 6th girl, and we were hoping for a boy. So after she was born, my wife said, why me? So the next one they come. You know, but that's a lot to that. Another actual bias is assuming a Spanish-speaking Hispanic child is undocumented. A natural bias is assuming people who have accents are less intelligent than we are. Let me tell you something. People who have accents have mastered 2 languages.